Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sedgemoor District Council's Licensing and Gambling Panel. I will now hand you over to our committee manager, Mr. Taylor.
Okay, hopefully everyone present will hear the meeting. However, in the event of a technical failure, the chairman will adjourn the panel and set a new time for its reinstatement. Please note that the meeting is being recorded and a copy of that recording will be available on the council's YouTube channel within the next few days. All attendees who have registered to speak should have their video on, but should remain muted until invited to speak. And all members of the press and public will remain muted. And the format of the meeting will be as per the agenda published. Back to you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Item number 1 is apologies for absence.
No apologies now,
Don't
Chairman.
have any. Item number 2 is urgent business, which I don't believe we have any.
None.
Item number 3 is any declarations of interest. Do I have any from my members? No. Brilliant. Item number 4, we're here today to discuss Orchardley Farm, and we're considering an application for a new premises licence for the cider barn, Orchardley Farm, Notting Hill Way, Stone Alliton, following objections having been received and the reports were attached. I'm now just going to check everyone can see and hear me and run through that sort of formal business. So I'll start. Obviously, I'm Polly Costello. I'm Councillor for Wedmore and Mark, and I'm the Chairman of the Licensing and General Purposes Committee. I can see and hear everyone. Councillor Murphy.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very sorry about these technical matters. I am the Sedgemoor District Council member for Burnham North. That's all I need to say. Thank you. Good morning to everybody.
And you can see and hear us.
I can see and hear you fully.
Brilliant. Councillor Riches.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Charlie Richards, Councillor for Cheddar and Shipham, and I can see and hear everybody. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Our applicant today is Stephen Rolfe. Stephen, can you see and hear us?
Yeah, my name's Stephen Rolfe. I actually go by Paul, but my name is Stephen Paul Rolfe, just to avoid any confusion if I get called by both names. And I can see and hear everyone.
Super, thank you. And you have a supporter here today, Mark Smith.
Yeah, morning everybody. I can see and hear everybody.
Brilliant, thank you, Mark. We're Parish Council. Bob, have I got Bob Quantrill?
Good morning. Yes, we can see you all. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Objectors, I've got Melissa Toney.
Good morning, Chair. Yes, I can see and hear everyone.
Brilliant. Unfortunately, Chapel Alliton Parish Council, the neighbouring parish council, did not register to speak in time and consequently won't be able to speak today, but their comments were circulated earlier this morning. I hope you got to see those. Officers today, we've got Mr. Baller. Good morning, Mr. Baller.
Morning, Chair. Morning, panel. Morning, everyone.
See and hear us?
Sorry. Yeah, I'm Simon Baller. I work for the Sedgemoor District Council Licensing Officer. Nothing to do with the technology today, and I can see and hear everyone, Chair.
Brilliant. Thank you. Our legal team today, we've got Mr. Osborne.
Morning, Chair. Nigel Osborne, legal advisor to the panel, and I can confirm that I can see and hear everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you. We've got Miss Webber.
Good morning, Chair. Emily Webber, legal apprentice for the council, and I can see and hear you.
Brilliant. I think that is everybody. Thank you. Just before we start, I just, for the benefit of the objectors, I need to make this absolutely clear that this is a licensing application. We're a licensing panel. And I know very much some of the objections about highways and planning issues. And we are solely to deal today with the licensing application. So if you can keep that in mind, I know so many of the objections have been about the other things, but that is not what we are here today. We are purely here to look at the licensing application. Thank you. Right. Now returning to the application, Mr. Baller, would you like to present the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Right, okay, so this is to consider the application for a new premises licence under the Licensing Act of 2003. I can say that on the 21st of September 2021, an application for a new premises licence in respect of the cider barn, Orchardley Farm, Notting Hill Way, Stone Alliton, Axbridge, Somerset, BS 26 2NG, was received from Mr. Stephen Rolfe. The application seeks authorization for the following licensable activities: the sale and supply of alcohol from 11:30 in the morning to 2300 at night, and that's daily, and that's on and off the premises. The provision of live music from 1800 hours to 2300 hours daily, indoors and outdoors. Music would be unamplified background with occasional live bands performing amplified music indoors or outdoors until but no later than 2300 hours for less than 500 people. And the provision of recorded music from 11:30 to 2300 hours daily, indoors and outdoors. Music would be unamplified, background and low volume indoors or outdoors until but no later than 2300 hours for less than 500 people. The applicant is also requesting that licensable activities are permitted until 0100 hours on the evening of New Year's Eve. A redacted copy of the application can be found in the pack, and it's attached as Appendix A. So the premises is a 300 square foot double apex cider barn. The barn has been used previously as a cider production facility over 40 years ago and maintains the original old cider pack press. The cider barn is located within the grounds of Orchardly Farm and surrounded by over 2,000 cider apple trees. The barn will have tables and chairs within an area directly in front of the barn, laid to grass, intended to be used for an outside area for consumption of alcohol and the licensing activities of live and recorded music. The barn will be used to make cider and as a tap room. The applicant has formed a partnership in the name of the applicant's wife, Mrs. Susan Rolfe. The applicant also seeks to amend the licensing hours for the sale and supply of alcohol and the licensing activities of live and recorded music on New Year's Eve until 1 o'clock. A copy of the plan of the cider barn currently in existence is attached as Appendix B in the pack, and a map of the area is shown as Appendix C. A larger map of the surrounding area is also shown at Appendix D. So the current position is objections to the application have been received within the permitted time frame from residents and Chapel Alliton Parish Council. The objectors are listed below, and I shall just go through them for you. So there's Mr. and Mrs. Collery, which is Appendix E, Mr. Patrick Cook, Appendix F, Mrs. Drinkwater, Appendix G, Miss Emily Rose B, Appendix H, MN Booth and PJ Holmes, Appendix I, Mr. Gary Homer, Appendix J, Mr. and Mrs. Rayside, Appendix K, Mr. and Mrs. Rigg, Appendix L, Chapel Alliton Parish Council, Appendix M, Mr. J and Mrs. E. Friend, Appendix N, Mrs. I Council, Appendix O, Mrs. Le Provost, Appendix P, and Julia Council, Appendix Q. Collectively, the objections do touch on all the licensing objectives, but most refer to the prevention of public nuisance and public safety. The licensing team have also received communication of support for the application from Weir Parish Council, who have met with the applicants, and Mr. Mark Smith, who also submitted a list containing 77 names and contact details of residents of Stone Alliton and the surrounding villages who are in support of the application, and all of whom were allegedly over 18. Weir Parish Council support emails attached as Appendix R. The police have also agreed a set of conditions with the applicant for inclusion with any granted licence, and these are shown at Appendix S. So the option for the panel is to grant the application as applied for, to grant the application with attached conditions, to grant the application in part, with attached conditions, or to refuse the application. The licensed officer has determined that the representations are relevant. It is therefore the duty of the panel to determine the application with a view to promoting licensing objectives, which are the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, the protection of children from harm. The issue for the panel is whether the application as submitted sufficiently promotes the licensing objectives, whether promotion of the licensing objectives requires the application to be granted subject to conditions, or whether the application requires it to be rejected because the licensing objectives cannot be met by the imposition of conditions. It is therefore the panel to determine the application. And that concludes the summary, please. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Baller. Has anyone got any questions for Mr. Baller? If you have, could you raise your hand? Can't. Okay. No, don't think anybody does at this stage. Okay, so we'll move on. It's now for the applicant. Mr. Rolfe to please present his application to us. Go ahead.
Certainly, thank you very much, Chairperson. And I think we've been through most of it with Simon anyway, but I'll go through the licensing objectives, if that's okay, how we're going to actually meet these licensing objectives. So in general, all 4 licensing objectives will be maintained within electronic and paper documents. They will underpin all training packages and will be the cornerstone to new and continual staff training events, and that's including myself and my wife. The 4 objectives will be considered as living documents and will be regularly updated and improved. Sources of improvement and suggestions will include the licensing authority, police, fire service, local councils, local schools and our customers. We have already spoken to our Parish Council, which is Weir, and we've also spoken to our neighbouring Parish Council, which is Chapel Alliton. We've also contacted our local PCSO, who has been around on 2 occasions now, and we've run an open day, of which up to 80 people turned up, and we've managed to express everything that we wanted to do there. So we've spoken to as many people as we can at this stage for our licensing objectives. We will also ensure our policies are promoted within the local parish newsletter, which we have already done once in response to an anonymous objection that was put in there. We'll also encourage feedback and suggestions on how our policies can be improved. We'll maintain a strong relationship with our local police community support officers and take advantage of their exceptional knowledge and experience. And we'll invite the PCSOs to support our staff training if possible. And our PCSO has already agreed to support our staff training. So on to the prevention of crime and disorder. We intend to promote the prevention of crime and disorder by implementing the following processes. Alcohol will be served in glass containers within the tap room only. Any alcohol taken into the outside seating area will be required to be contained within plastic glasses. Now, after a conversation with the police, we have altered that to be toughened glass, not just glass within the cider barn. Customers will not be permitted to take open alcohol or soft drink containers from the premises. All bottles and glasses will be collected as soon as the contents have been drunk. We will establish capacity limits based on discussions with the police and fire services to prevent overcrowding. Irresponsible drink promotions will not be permitted. We will establish a proof of age policy, Challenge 21. This has now been updated to Challenge 25 after discussions with the police. We will ensure a comprehensive range of non-alcoholic and low alcohol products are available for purchase. We will establish a designated driver program, which will provide free or reduced cost soft drinks for designated drivers within a group. We will inform the police immediately if any drug-related activities or paraphernalia is suspected. We will establish a zero-tolerance approach to any crime and disorder, ensuring appropriate signage is displayed, and we will refuse service to anyone who is visibly intoxicated. So that's our prevention for crime and disorder plan. For public safety, we intend to promote public safety by implementing the following processes. We have installed emergency lighting within the cider barn above each exit. These will be tested weekly and the records will be kept to the tests. And this has already been completed. An evacuation procedure will be established and displayed at suitable and prominent locations within the cider barn. This has been agreed with Devon and Somerset Fire and Safety, and they have no further comments on our fire safety. All exit doors will remain unlocked and unobstructed during licensing hours or when any staff are present. Fire extinguishers, fire blankets and signs will be available in accordance with advice from the fire service, which we have already done. These will be regularly checked and records kept. Arrangements have been made to accommodate disabled customers, such as ramps and wide doors for wheelchair access. Adequate and appropriate first aid equipment will be available in the premises. At least one trained first aider will be on duty at all times. Health and safety signs will be installed. Free drinking water will be provided at all times when the premises is open. A smoking area will be provided outside the cider barn, and safe location for the disposal of cigarette ends will be provided. The premises will operate a no smoking policy within the building, and hand sanitising solution will be available at all building access points. So that's our plan for looking after public safety. The prevention of public nuisance. We intend to promote the prevention of public nuisance by implementing the following procedures. Prominent, clear and legible notices are displayed at all exits requesting patrons to respect the needs of local residents and to leave the premises in the area quietly. Playing of live or amplified music in the outside area will not be permitted after 2300. Dustbins will be provided for customer use and emptied regularly, minimum daily. Staff will undertake regular litter pickup around the premises daily. We will refuse service to anyone who is visibly intoxicated, and all activities will cease promptly at 2300. And finally, the protection of children from harm. We intend to protect children from harm by establishing a clear proof of age policy, Challenge 21. As I've stated already after discussions with the police, that's now Challenge 25. And ensuring staff are trained and checked. Valid forms of identification that will be accepted are valid passport, photo card, driving licence, HM Forces identity card, and a pass accredited identification card. Staff training records will be available on request. To ensure clear signage of the Challenge 25 policy is displayed. Ensuring glasses and other alcohol containers are cleared promptly to ensure children do not have access to leftover alcohol. Ensure any new staff provide a valid DBS check prior to employment. Establish a zero tolerance and instant removal approach to anyone who buys or attempts to buy alcohol for children, and signage will reflect this. And ensure anyone under the age of 18 does not have access to the designated smoking area to prevent underage smoking or the risks of passive smoking. Now, as Simon Bowler has already mentioned, we've had some conditions come through from the police, which I have here in front of me, and of course we accept every single one of those unequivocally. Do you want anything further from that, Chairman?
No, that's quite comprehensive. Thank you. Has anybody got any questions for Stephen at all? You raise your hands if you do. Mr. Bowler first, then Councillor Richards. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Rolfe. I mean, that was quite a comprehensive set of licensing objectives you got there. Much, far more above and beyond what normally is applied to a new application. With that in mind, just to set people's minds at rest, do you intend to have, because you got an emphasis on live music events, do you intend to have a live music venue, i.e. regular live music every weekend?
No, we're not. So what the application is for the opening days, the licence application does specify 11:30 to 2300, 7 days a week. I put this in for standard licensing hours, as is my opinion, that is standard licensing hours. What our actual intention is to open the cider barn from 11:30 till 5 o'clock every day for the selling and tasting of cider. And then probably 2 days a week, and we're thinking Friday and Saturday, we'd open it to 2300 for use as a tap room, where we would sell the cider, but obviously not everyone likes cider. So we'd like to include some other alcoholic beverages as well, beer and wine and the like. The reason for doing that is that we wanted to avoid having to go through a full variation if we wanted to open, for example, on a bank holiday Monday, or if we had a new cider promotion sort of variety that we were releasing that we wanted to put on a special event so people could come and taste it. So that's the reason we went for the full 7 days a week. We don't intend to open 7 days a week on there at all. For music, we intend to have live music, if possible, a couple of times a year. However, we're here to compromise, absolutely, with the people who are objecting. And if the feeling is that we want to remove outside music entirely, then we're content to do that. We don't want to do anything that's going to upset any of our friends and neighbours, because ultimately they're our friends and neighbours and also our customers. So we're quite happy to remove that if that's required and just have the background music within the bar. But it would be nice, I think, on a summer's day to have a live band outside while people are drinking cider. But that was the idea behind that.
Okay, thank you very much. Just one more question. Regard car parking, have you got any facilities for the parking of vehicles, and what are your plans for? Because a lot of the problems we encounter are light pollution from car lights and people gathering around cars before they go home talking, and they're not going home and they're just hanging around. Have you got any provision to do some sort of safe parking and dispersal, and ensure that people leave quietly and quickly?
We actually have parking at the moment for 6 cars. We have planning permission, actually extant, to destroy this beautiful cider barn that's been there for over 100 years and build 3 holiday lets. We're not going to do that. However, the planning permission had other elements to it, which means it's still continuing. But within that planning permission was permission to build 12 parking spaces on there. Whether we do that or not, I'm not quite sure at the moment. but we can certainly accommodate up to 6 cars. Our feeling that that is going to be enough. The local public house, the Wheatsheaf Inn, regularly has what's considered a good turnout at the pub at the weekends, which can be up to 20 to 30 to 40 people even. They had an event just a couple of weeks ago, a Halloween event, of which they had 40 people, and they thought that was a good turnout. Again, they get between 3 and 5 cars, hardly any cars at all. Most people will be walking, we expect, from the surrounding villages, and so we don't expect to have many cars coming down and parking down at the cider barn. In fact, when we had the open day for the village and the surrounding areas, we had 80 people there and only 3 cars.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Richards, I saw your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There are a couple of areas I would like to dig into a bit deeper with Mr. Rolfe. These are in terms of prevention of public nuisance and noise. You're talking about the potential of having, albeit unamplified, music outside, and this could be, as you're talking at the moment, a couple of times a week, but we're looking at a license application which is every day.
Yep.
So we have to look at it in those terms, because that could be what happens if we're giving you the license. Now, what measures are you looking at to mitigate any noise nuisance to neighbours? You don't mention anywhere in your statement about monitoring systems. Are you know, it's very common for this type of venue that you would have some sort of perimeter noise monitoring system, that you would go out at key times and you would keep records that are available for inspection by licensing officers and the police and others. So could you perhaps expand about the area of how you're intending to avoid any noise nuisance to neighbours?
Of course, yes. And I'll be absolutely honest, we hadn't considered that monitoring type systems, and we'll be content to have that as a condition if that's required of what we need. The cider barn itself is in the middle of a farm, which is surrounded by thousands. There's 2,100, I think, last count of cider apple trees and numerous hedgerows, and we're 150 metres away from the closest property. So we don't consider that any noise from those will be of an issue to neighbours. But also, as I've stated, if that is something which is, and it clearly is with the objections, something that people feel very strongly about, we're happy to have that remove the entire outside music type of events as an activity, or to have those monitoring devices, as you're mentioning, to be put on the outsides of the premises. Also, we're happy to have that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rolfe. Chair, if I may continue just to explore another area, and that is, which was alluded to by Mr. Baller, and that is parking and the numbers of people. There's clearly been a lot of to and froing by, as we see in the correspondence and the objections, about quite the number of people that are expected to use this event. One thing I do pick up on is that there's a mention that perhaps you'd have the Wurzels come and perform. Now, they're a very, very popular group in this part of the country and tend to attract large numbers of people, for which I'd have thought even 12 car parking spaces could be quite interesting. And I just wonder again about your sort of event management plans. What do you have in place to be able to put on that sort of activity, if you are looking to have, and your capacity would be 499 if we were to grant this application as it currently stands?
Yeah, I'm sorry to smile there, Councillor. It's the whole Wurzels piece was a tongue-in-cheek comment, as we'd had a lot of people thinking we were going to have Glastonbury move from its current location up to Orchardley Farm and have thrash metal concerts, at which point I made the tongue-in-cheek comment that no, we're not going to have thrash metal, it'll be more akin to the Wurzels. And so that's where that's come from. We certainly haven't got any booking, we have no intention of booking anything like the size of the Wurzels. what we're thinking about is a very small outside band to entertain some people who are sat drinking cider in the summer months. As I say, it's a small location. The local pub, the Wheatsheaf pub, which is just about to close for 18 months to 2 years, regularly, or didn't regularly, occasionally had some events go on there, and again had no more than 40 odd people turn up. So there is no expectation that any of the events we will attract more people than that. So no, we're not expecting to have something like the Wurzels or Orchardley Farm.
Okay, thank you, Chair. That's me for the time being.
Great, thank you. I've got a hand raised, but I can't see who it is. Can you, Steve? It's in the +5.
It's Councillor Murphy, and I also believe Melissa Tony wishes to speak as well.
Okay, so Councillor Murphy and then Melissa, if you could go after him, thank you. Councillor Murphy, are you there?
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of a toing and froing with my buttons. Here we are. I'd like to just explore a little bit what Councillor Riches was saying, because I've been holding events in Manor Gardens in Burnham-on-Sea for 27 years. And I can tell you that it depends entirely on the band that you employ. If you employ a band, you know that, Mr. Ball. I think if you employ a band, and clearly if you have the right granted to you to open from 7:30 to 11:30, and you decide at some point to have a band, then you could have parking problems, and you're in an area where you are liable to have parking problems. If you only have parking, how many cars can you have, Mr. Ball? Is it 6 or 3?
6 at the moment, but we have planning permission for 12.
Planning permission for 12, okay. But even with 12, but certainly with 6 in that very quiet area and very narrow roads, I'm a little worried about that. I also understand that you have bookings, a booking for a wedding and hope to have wedding bookings. Is that correct?
No, that is incorrect. That is not correct at all. We have no booking for weddings. We have no intention for being a wedding venue. Well, clearly, that would be a separate license. We do have a family party booked for next year, which is a close friend of the family who are coming across. It is not a wedding. It is not a wedding reception. We have a wedding plan.
Much for answering that. I mean, but certainly the interesting thing about this particular application is the potential. I will be looking closely at the potential for nuisance, and that is, I mean, you know, one of the things that we have to look at when we're doing risk assessments for events in gardens or in Highbridge at the Southwell Gardens. We have a risk assessment, and that includes the potential for nuisance. I'm a little bit worried about the parking in terms of people. I accept that many people in country areas are so used to walking in the dark, going into fields in the dark. It's normal. It's absolutely normal. And I can see that they will want to walk, and certainly with the drink driving laws, it could be an absolute advantage. But I will be watching and listening very carefully to see what nuisance there could be potentially from this application. Thank you, Chair.
I completely agree. It was why I said, you know, up front, if the removal of the outside music is something that we're quite happy to compromise on. And I also suggest that it's not forgotten that we are in the middle of an orchard with thousands of trees and hedgerows around us, which naturally sort of reduces the amount of noise pollution that moves around. In fact, when we had the meeting with 80 people, the open day, the chair of the Parish Council's wife arrived late, thought the meeting had finished because she got within 15 yards of the building and couldn't hear anything. So we're very confident that there isn't a noise issue. If we remove the outside music part of the application, we're happy that will negate all of that entirely.
Thank you, Mr. Rolfe. I am sorry I called you Mr. Bowler. It was a mistake. But Mr. Rolfe, thank you for your reply. Thank you, Chair.
Brilliant, thank you. Can you put your hand down, Mr. Murphy? Brilliant, thank you. Melissa, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Rolfe, there's just a couple of points, really. Firstly, dealing with, my apologies, could you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, sorry. In the first instance, the application that we have had sight of is dated in September of this year. there is available as part of any consideration of new developments within the area, the Alliton Village Design Plan. Do you know if you'd had any consideration to that before submitting your application?
That hadn't been applied. That hadn't been sent to me at all. No.
Okay, so most of our objections.
I'm actually in Weir Parish Council, so there's no reason why I would look at the other parish council's design plan.
Of course, but of course we are dealing with a largely rural and village-based area, and so the preservation of that conservation area would be something that you would have high regard to. And so whilst it may not be a prominent model available for the Weir Council, I would suggest to you that there's some very relevant and helpful points, as highlighted already by the other councillors, Councillor Murphy, for example, and Councillor Ritchie's, who highlighted some concerns that they would have. So just for complete transparency, just so you know that I've had sight of that document, so I will be relying upon some of the points raised therein. I, of course, appreciate the distinction between them. One of my main concerns, firstly, deals with the numbering, and I think Councillor Ritchie's raised that point. You're making an application for up to 500 on the basis that the regulated activity would include a sale of alcohol on off. We have the 7 days a week within relevant hours of 12-hour days, and equally we have the provision for recorded music for similar timings. You made mention that your concern is that you don't want to have to apply for variations later on. Isn't that a slightly broad brush approach to take in light of the fact that you could, for example, apply for temporary event notices if you did have specific events?
Yeah, and I'm happy to do that instead. So if the condition is, for example, and I'm not wishing to preempt what the hearing panel are going to say, but if the result is, for example, we have permission to open for cider tasting and for sales between 11:30 and 5 o'clock daily, with the ability to open to 11 o'clock on a Friday and Saturday only, no outside music, and everything else is run under the 10 process, I'm completely content with that.
Okay, so that's quite a dramatic shift from what the application is, and I think
we're responding to what the objectors have said, and we are keen to listen and keen to compromise so that we can come to a compromise.
I'm grateful for that, only because when Mr. Baller was reading out the position as where we stood, and he spoke about any amendments to the license, that wasn't raised as part of a suggestion of an amendment to any conditions you'd had. But moving on from that point, and I think one of the greatest concerns, as you can appreciate, so I represent the interests of Mr. and Mrs. Riggs today, and one of their greatest concerns is firstly that they live within about 200 meters away from the premises, and so they will be one of the closer properties to the premises and would probably be the most affected, both in the permission of accessibility to the premises, and I know we're not dealing with that today, but of course the overflow of traffic onto the relevant lanes, and of course the concerns of parking are ones that are directly relevant for them. Now, you made mention of the fact that you have permission potentially for 11 parking spaces, and you draw a similarity between yourself and the local public house. Can I please just make, for clarification purposes, confirm that the distinction between yourself and the public house, I understand that they have parking for 20 parking spaces as opposed to 12?
They may well have. Yes, they may well have. They have a parking space outside on the road, yes.
Yeah, and so
not away, yes.
And so for them, whilst there is, you're trying to draw some sort of similarities between yourselves and them, they already have capacity that's slightly, possibly less cumbersome on the village than possibly what you're proposing.
The Wheatsheaf pub as well is obviously a public house. It's also a smokehouse. It is also a restaurant for dining. There's a marquee there, and it is a convenience store. So there is a lot more uses for the Wheatsheaf. They still only have parking for 20 people. We're not expecting anywhere near the levels of parking for what we're considering.
So approximately, whilst we've dealt with this issue very briefly, what are the numbers that you are anticipating?
I'm anticipating similar numbers to or less than currently gets on a busy day. I'm also expecting less than one of the other localish pubs, which is the Trotters Inn, which is within 2 miles. And the average patronage there is roughly between 20, and this is big broad brush, between 20 and 40 people.
20 and 40. Okay, and so how are you seeking to manage those numbers?
in so much as the barn itself is relatively small, and so there will be capacity limits naturally by health and safety and by fire to ensure that we don't exceed any maximum numbers of people anyway. So we're looking at a potentially maximum amount of people that could use the barn is about 100 people. That's bearing in mind, it's giving them something like half a metre per person, so that's busy. But that's from the Devon and Somerset fire and safety people.
So the maximum capacity within the barn is 100.
It's approximately 100, yes.
Yes, and would you be seeking to obtain 100 capacity maximum at any time?
We'd be seeking to obtain the amount of that we can safely keep within the barn, but there's a difference between having 100 people in there and how many we would expect to have, which I would suggest would be similar, if not less, than a public house, which is down the road. Stone Alliton itself, the hamlet, only has 100 people in it.
And so, no, that's helpful. Thank you. My thoughts were just about the flexible approach that we would have by the license in the terms that is currently drafted. And if we have a license that, you know, can allow us up to 500 people, essentially with a capacity of up to 100, I think theoretically what you're asking for is a condition possibly for maximum capacity. Have you done a fire risk assessment on the property to evaluate its capacity?
Yes, I've done a fire risk assessment and it has been agreed with the Devon and Somerset fire safety people. Now, the way I understand it, and this could well be my confusion, is the 500 people is to do with music, and that is a boundary between having music, which is an activity at the farm, and something that moves above 500 into a major event. So that number of 500 was in there just as the music boundary in there, which is, as I say, keeping it below that major event. So it's a number I thought we had to have in there. There is no way you can put 100 people on at this location. 500 people at this location.
No, of course not. But as a condition, we can have a condition about maximum capacity within the conditions.
I fully expect there would be by health and safety and by fire safety. I'm sure they will give me a capacity limit. Absolutely, for safety.
So our concern, of course, is that if we are looking at a situation where events can have a maximum of approximately up to 100, and that doesn't encompass, I said, about anything about outside space, then potentially we could have capacities higher than that within the area. How do you intend to manage the issue of any nuisance or destruction that may be caused within the locality because of such numbers coming through the village?
Well, that's obviously in the in our plan and our application with the prevention of public nuisance, and with discussions with the PCSO and with the Devon and Somerset police licensing people, Nicola Cooper, is to make sure that we have appropriate signage to make sure that people are leaving quietly. I don't imagine people will be driving through the village. They'll be coming down Notting Hill Way or potentially along Alliton Lane or Dunkery Lane into the facilities.
Okay, so, and like the chair highlighted at the beginning, the accessibility to the premises is not an issue that we can really discuss today. But of course, just for the purposes of the record, can I just say that that is a concern of my clients who are instructed today. Our other concern deals largely with essentially the management of any sort of antisocial behavior, and that kind of ties in somewhat with crime and disorder aspect of things, and I would suggest to you does tie in slightly with aspects of public safety as well. Our concerns in your conditions, you made mention of the fact, my apologies if I can just find my notes. You have provisions to deal with alcohol misuse, responsible drinking, etc., drug monitoring training, which are all very helpful. Our question really deals with the types of people that the events would be attracting. Whilst you've given an indication of what you're not going to have, what are you expecting to be doing at the site?
We're expecting it to the people that will be coming to the site will be the people from the local community. That is what we're expecting.
Okay, so when you say the application would be allowing for example, you made mention of the outdoor music. We're not expecting any sort of larger scale events that would attract people from outside areas that can be ticketed or evented to be coming to the village.
No, that is not an expectation at all.
That's helpful, thank you. With regards to, my apologies, I'm just finding my way, Chair. With regards to the safety of and use of the premises, you made mention of there being availability, I believe, for some 40 chairs outside as part of your representations, I believe, in the letter, the open letter to the parish. How are you going to manage the preservation of the area in so much as use of toilets and other such available facilities? Have you done an assessment with regards to how that would be managed?
Yeah, we're looking at the potential. We have one toilet in there at the moment. We're looking at potential of either portaloos or the building of a toilet block. I don't quite understand the question about 40 chairs. Yes, we currently have 40 chairs, but they're for use inside the barn.
Of course. And do you have any concerns, do you have any provisions as to lighting? There was a lot of mention about noise. How do you propose that the lighting within the vicinity would be managed? As a rural area, as you know, there is very little public lighting on the street lighting, and there's reduced activity across the family homes. Are you proposing any external lightings that could cause any nuisance to the family?
No.
So how would the outside area be lit?
It will be lit with low-level lighting, as is commensurate with the area. As I say, the barn is in the middle of a farm surrounded by 2,100 trees and several hedgerows. We'll use low-level lighting, and I see no reason why there should be any expectation of any light pollution from the location. We certainly don't want it. We live here.
No. The only other points I wish to raise, Chair, deal largely with, excuse me, the late hours of operation, and I think we've dealt with those to some degree. However, Mr. Rolfe, are you suggesting then that the hours until 11:30 p.m. would they be running throughout the year, or would there be occasional periods of the year for which you would be seeking the extension of that time?
11 o'clock, as we've mentioned.
11, sorry. Yes.
11 o'clock, not 11:30, so promptly at 11 o'clock.
Thank you.
The only thing that we've asked for, which was requested by a number of people in the community, is if we could run something so the community would have somewhere to go on New Year's Eve. So we've asked for an extension till 1 o'clock on New Year's Eve only.
Of course. But the later operating hours for the weekend, you say you made mention of Friday and potentially Saturday, I believe, earlier in discussions. Would you be seeking for that to be in operation every weekend?
Yes.
And so what would be the purpose of it running every weekend, again, if it is you're seeking only occasional events?
Because we've already been talking about events outside, and we're saying that we're quite happy to remove that if that's what's required as a condition. Potentially move that to 10. So we're just looking at normal licensing hours for within inside the side barn. So I'm talking at the moment of Friday and Saturday. So there is a community location for people to come get together and have a drink.
Thank you. Have you had any consideration for other similar premises which are running in local areas and their hours of operating in drafting your license and its conditions at all?
No, I've used what I thought was the correct for our location.
I just simply draw reference for the purposes of complete transparency and to say the considerations that we have had. The Cheddar Rail themselves only have licensing hours until 8 p.m. Whilst the local public house, I believe, they themselves has reduced operating hours when they were in operation. And of course, they being more of a food-led pub, did not have any, I understand, outdoor or live music being played at the premises.
That's not true. They have had music. They had a Dolly Parton tribute just a few weeks ago, which was outside, which was very loud, and we couldn't hear anything. They've had a Halloween function in the marquee. They've run from an outside marquee since, I'm going to say June, July, but for some considerable amount of time. So there is an outside area with the Wheat Sheaf, but the Wheat Sheaf is closing due to the landlord wanting to do renovations. So that is now closed effectively and will be in 2023.
And would it be fair to say that they themselves would probably be only running events on occasional periods of time?
Yes,
that being the public pub, which is what your intention would be.
Yes.
I'm grateful. I have no further questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Richards?
Thank you, Chair. Following on from that discussion, could I ask perhaps Mr. Osborne to clarify for us, I think, a couple of points which are emerging, because I'm unclear now as to the application before us. There's been some discussion that it will be modified. I'm not quite sure now if we're talking about the application that was submitted or the potential modified application. And the second point I'd like clarification of is, can we put a condition which actually states the number of people that can attend the venue? We've had alluded to that Devon Fire and Rescue have already given some numbers, but we haven't been told what they are. And can we put that in as a condition, please, Mr. Osborne? So those 2 points. I'm not the actual application we're now looking at. What is it, and the numbers?
The application you're looking at is as presented in the paperwork. Mr. Rolfe hasn't amended his application. What he has done is said that he is sympathetic to the panel restricting or in their consideration restricting either outside music or even removing it, and potentially restricting or amending his trading hours commensurate with the suggestions he put forward. But his stated position remains: I have put in an application for 7 days a week till 11:30 at night, and that remains my application. It's up for the panel to determine whether or not they feel, given some of the suggestions he's put forward, that he would be sympathetic to, whether they wish to embrace those suggestions as part of the application, given the level of and the nature of some of the objections that you've heard. So obviously you have to make a decision that's proportionate to what you've heard, and as to whether you feel those decisions sufficiently promote the licensing objectives. So that's that factor. With regards to numbers, it is not, numbers are dictated by other legislation, namely fire service regulations, which are administered by the fire service, and it is not for the licensing Act and the licensing panel to interfere with their remit. They're better placed to determine limits given the events that are taking place, and therefore how it's left is that the best we would do is to say that capacity limits will be determined by a risk assessment undertaken by the fire service, and that's how it should be. It's not for the licensing panel to say it should be 100, it should be 50 or whatever, because obviously circumstances can change, and the fire service is best placed to inspect and to determine those capacity limits.
Stephen, I see you've got your hand up.
Yes, just wanted to make note that when we first started to see the objections coming through, I did contact Sedgemoor Licensing to say, can we make adjustments to the licensing application as it currently stands to remove that music or to limit that outside music? And I was informed that I was unable to do that as it's a legal document that had been served. And so it's not the case that we're trying to get around anything. We did actually try and sent a message to Kate Trunks, but we were unable to do so at that stage.
Thank you. And as Mr. Osborne has just clarified again, you know, it's for the members on this panel today to work out what we decide to do, whether we're going to put conditions into this or not. So that is for us to decide a bit later on in this meeting. Have we got any more questions for Mr. Rolfe at this stage? No, I don't think so. Brilliant. So next up on my agenda, I've got a supporter, Mark Smith. Mark, is there anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, I've just got some brief words. There is substantial groundswell of local support for the licence application, as indicated by the letter of support signed by over 70 local residents. All of the signatures were over 18 and living within the Allitons and surrounding villages. We do see this very much as a small-scale local facility, so we resisted the opportunity to box the numbers by including those from further afield. Many of the signatories have received the anonymous correspondence circulating last month and were all consequently fully aware of the objections lodged, but they still continue to support the application. The level of support locally contradicts this morning's statement from Chapel Alliton Parish Council. This fails to acknowledge that the Wheatsheaf is now closed as a pub until 2023. It also focuses on the demand of Stone Alliton without mentioning the residents of Chapel Alliton, many of whom have signed the letter of support. The Parish Council also appears to expect their residents to walk 4 miles to nearby pubs along narrow unlit roads. We believe that Orchardly can be a much needed community and social hub for the Allitons. It will provide a great venue for clubs and societies to meet within the village and also allow residents the opportunity to socialise locally. There are many within our community who do not want to drive to local villages to do this, but the recent closure of the Wheatsheaf will make this more difficult and the community could be worse off as a result. Given time, we feel that Orchardly can more than fill the gap left by Wheatsheaf's closure and can bring our community together. At the same time, we can support a new rural enterprise and help to re-establish traditional local craft in the village. To provide locally sourced and produced products is a great objective with obvious environmental and economic benefits. And if successful, there could be job opportunities for local children. To conclude, I would like to reconfirm the local support and enthusiasm for Orchardly's application. Whilst we recognise and understand the objections raised, we strongly feel that approving the application will be largely welcomed and it will prove to be a great amenity and valuable asset for the villages. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Has anybody got any questions for Mark? Melissa?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Just a really quick question, Mr. Smith. So the supporters that you said who have provided their names in support of the application today, was that on the basis of the application that is before the panel today, or was that on the basis of the conversations that Mr. Rolfe has then quite clearly shown as variations to the application?
On both. I think quite a few people attended the open day at Orchardly, so are aware that Mr. Rolfe has got some negotiation room and happy to fit in with the requirements of the village.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, next up we've got Weir Parish Council. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Bob Quantrill. I'm the chairman of Weir Parish Council, and the cider barn at Orchardly Farm is in our parish of Weir, not Chapel Alliton. My councillors and I have met with Mr. and Mrs. Rolfe, and they kindly showed us around and pointed to us what they intend to do on site. The site is in a rural area, and there is local pub nearby called the Wheatsheaf Inn, which is currently closed for internal business. And so this will make a great alternative for residents. And as we all know, such places do bring the community closer together. Orchardly Farm has harvested apples in the production of cider for decades. The production of alcohol, such as cider from the agricultural production, is not seen as an ancillary to the original business, as proven to the Supreme Court between David Bryan Millington versus the Secretary of State for the Environment, Transport and Regions versus Shrewsbury and Acton Borough Council in 1998, a copy of which was handed or was sent to your office yesterday and acknowledged. So therefore, does not require a separate planning application. The notion that the business will cause extra traffic congestion is not proven, as Mr. and Mrs. Rolfe have already received planning permission to use the separate drive for traffic. Children walking to and from school is also unfounded, as the parent of some of the children also works at the school and drops his children off each morning and brings them home at evenings. Mr. and Mrs. Rolfe have promised to keep noise levels down to a minimum, and this includes light, pollution. The traffic flowing into and out of Orchardie Farm is not a problem, and the small lane is already congested with local residents' vehicles who all have garages that they could park off the road if they had patience to open their gates and park inside. The Parish Council therefore give our full support in Mr. and Mrs. Rolfe's new premises licence, and therefore any business relating to Orchardie Farm is of no concern directly with Chapel Alliton, and they should have gone through the proper officers of Weir Parish Council to resolve these matters, and not directly with Mr. and Mrs. Rolfe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Do we have any questions for Bob at all? Melissa?
Thank you, Chair. Just for some points of clarification, sorry, is the suggestion that the only children that use the lane, their parents work at the school and no other children therefore use the lane, either during the school period, to and from school period, or even outside of that period?
This was proved with a survey that was carried out where no children went from the lane to pick up the coach on a morning or evening. And it was seen that the children were taken by the teacher, who also lives at the school, and took the children. This was a survey carried out since all the fuss and bother.
Just for confirmation, Chair, I have strict instructions from Mrs. Riggs, whose child I understand is in year 11 and does use the access area for her child to make his way to school. But that is not the issue. The suggestion, of course, is that the children only use the lane for the purposes of school. We know that this is a country lane. We know that this is a parish, I beg your pardon, a rural area, whereby people walk the lanes outside of those times. So I would suggest that whilst there is that suggestion, that is not the only consideration to have. The other point simply deals with, sorry, that was being raised, is about the accessibility. Suggestion is being made that another access is being used. Just for confirmation, can that please be confirmed?
Even, to be perfectly honest, even with vehicles parked outside their properties, tractors and trailers and lorries can still get past, and do frequently, as there has been considerable amount of building work carrying on that particular road towards the Wheatsheaf anyway.
I'm grateful. I think the point is simply is that there will be an acceptance of increased traffic within the area. Can I just please make that point?
Yes,
thank you.
That's points noted. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lovely. Right. Next, Melissa, you're out. It's your turn.
Thank you. I expect most of my points have already been raised, and apologies to all parties for having kept matters back slightly. So as explained, of course, I'm here on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Rigg, and their concerns, I expect I have reiterated and you, of course, have the letter of representations which have been submitted. For the purposes of the proceedings, can I please ask that that letter is relied upon in consideration, Chair? Sorry, I'm not sure if that's for me. No, I don't think that's me. Thank you. With regards to a summary, if I can deal with it this way. Firstly, we would be suggesting...
I've got summaries coming up in a minute.
Oh, I'm grateful. In which case, for the purposes of today, our objections largely deal with not so much just the accessibility, but of course, from the perspective of public safety. Firstly, the fact that there is no street lighting within the area. And so any increased lighting, however minimal, as suggested by Mr. Rolfe, will have a negative impact on the community as it stands. Sorry, Chair, were you going to say something? No. Oh, sorry. The extra traffic within the village in itself, we would be suggesting does present a risk of accidents, increased traffic along the narrow lanes. These are country lanes. The accessibility, whilst it's not an issue today, is of course restricted, and we would suggest that's a strong consideration. So when Mr. Rolfe speaks about his application being for a period as it stands, as we have to consider it today, for the 12 hours, 7 days a week, that increased traffic does present a risk to all walkers, not just students or young people making their way to and from school, which we would say increases any safety and should be considered today. Our other concern really largely deals with crime and disorder, which I've already alluded to. We have a situation whereby there will be an increase of alcohol within the area at relevant periods. Currently, and often is the case, most associated with increased alcohol would be other antisocial behavior, which can include drugs, misuse, and other negative impacts on the community. Mr. Rolfe has put in consideration some conditions that can alleviate that, but our concerns mainly strive from the point that if the operation of the license is as wide as it stands, then that increased period of time will take away from the conservation aspect of the area that is in existence, and that can cause a severe disturbance and negative impact again. With regards to prevention of such public nuisance, I would ask that the chair have regard for not only issues of noise and traffic and litter and light spill, but the general taints that would cause on the character of the village as it stands. If we had a situation where we could have capacity of, and I work on the basis of the application as it stands, of at least 500 people at any one event, because that's of course the maximum capacity, not that I understand it's being Mr. Rolfe's intention to do that, then of course that could cause some difficulties for the management of the situation within the area. We've not been privy and we've not seen any sort of event management plan, any risk assessments, noise assessments, none of which can negate or mitigate these situations. And we would suggest that this lack of consultation or consideration for these aspects of things are what is most concerning to the rigs about the management of the license and by that of the license holders. Chair, I seek not to go into any more because of course I would be addressing you on summary slightly, but unless anyone has any questions of me, I can see that where Parish Council has their hands up. I'll pause there.
Yeah, thank you. Bob, have you got a question there for Melissa?
Hello, Chairman. It's John Augustus here. I'm the parish clerk for Weir. I just wanted to clarify that there's been a lot of discussion about traffic and about light pollution. My understanding, and I may be wrong, so you need to correct me if I am wrong, but that is all a planning issue. It's nothing to do with this particular license. So I don't think we should continue raising those issues because it's not part of this forum.
You're absolutely correct. I did make that clear at the beginning that this isn't anything to do with planning or highways.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
I am grateful, and whilst I seek not to labour on the point, the only point I'm making is those are considerations that are live for the residents. And if indeed we are to reduce the conditions of the licence in any way, that those are factors that potentially would be factored in as to why they ought to be reduced. I seek not to say any more on it than that, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. And the panel will discuss that in our private session momentarily. Anybody else got a question for Melissa? No? Okay. Have we got any other final points or questions anyone wants to raise before we sum up? No. Okay. So summing up, Mark, have you got anything else you'd like to say?
No further comments, thank you.
Brilliant. Stephen?
Yeah, just a quick summary, if I may.
Yeah, please
First,
do.
I'd like to thank the Sedgemoor Licensing and Hearing Board for allowing us the opportunity to present our licensing application and to hear from people both for and against the application. It's true to say that Orchardley Farm has been cultivating cider apple varieties with the purpose of making and selling cider for well over 100 years. The agricultural activity of cultivating cider apple varieties and making and selling cider for profit is our primary business and primary source of income. Focus on the licensing application, we understand the judgment, as has been mentioned by Weir Council, decided by the Court of Appeal in the Millington versus Secretary of State for Environment, that the production, tasting and sales of cider is considered a perfectly normal agricultural activity that does not require any change of use or planning permission. What we're discussing is the licence application to sell the cider produced at Orchardley Farm, along with other alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages based against the 4 licensing priority objectives. Within the licensing application, we have laid out a robust plan to address the 4 licensing objectives individually and taken as a whole. This plan was praised by both the local PCSO, Steve Hemmett, and the area licensing practitioner, Taunton and West Somerset, Miss Nicola Cooper, as one of the most comprehensive responses in a licensing application. We have already engaged with our Parish Council, Weir, and invited them to the farm to see the proposed plan for themselves. We have also conducted the same for Chapel Alliton Parish Council due to their proximity to Stone and Chapel Alliton. We ran an open day so anyone from the council and surrounding villages could attend and ask questions. We have attended a special Chapel Alliton parish meeting set up specifically to discuss the application and posted information within the Alliton newsletter. All of these steps we have committed to do in our licence application, and we have completed them. Suzanne and I have worked hard to provide our trustworthy credentials to the local community, and due to these efforts, we have seen huge support from the majority of the local community, PCSO and the area licensing practitioner. We have also worked with the Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service to the point where they have stated that all fire safety matters appear to be of satisfactory standard and they have no further comments. Suzanne and I appreciate the time and effort that various objectors to our application have taken to formally respond to the application. We have listened and we are keen to find areas of compromise where possible. In our opinion, some concerns are entirely understandable, such as noise from external music. Others seem to be based on old or slightly distorted information, such as school bus and youth club attendance. On the subject of noise, despite the fact that the barn is surrounded by hundreds of trees and many hedges, and despite the fact we are over 150 metres away from the nearest property and only 9 properties are within 200 metres, we appreciate there may be concern around noise from outside music performances. We would be willing to limit outside music to a couple of times a year, or perhaps remove entirely from the application and continue with the 10s. The opening hours that we have requested are based on standard licensing hours. Our intention is to open every day between the hours of 11:30 and 5 for the tasting and sales of cider made on the premises. Further, we hope to open on Friday and Saturday until 2300 as a tap house to allow the sales of alcohol and a meeting venue for members of the community. The reason behind us applying for the entire week, as I mentioned earlier, so we could open on a bank holiday or as a special event without the need for a full variation application. Light pollution has been raised by several people. We do not expect to have anything more than low-level lighting. Most of the other concerns surround access to the farm, and we've already mentioned that that is a separate noise, so I'm not going to go into that at all. And that is my summary. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Bob, John, have you got anything else you'd like to say?
All I can say in summing up is that if Alliton had done what they should have done and gone through Weir Parish Council, most of this would not have arisen. When you note we have no formal objections to this application from Weir Parish or Weir parishioners. Also, there is no planning issues, as if you refer to the previous mentioned High Court decisions, these are all covered by the fact that it's a working farm and the cider side of it is all part of the produce that's being produced. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa?
Thank you, Chair. In the first instance, whilst the application is being made today, my simple representation is that firstly, the application is refused. I accept nonetheless that in light of some of the conditions that are being presented in draft now by Mr. Wolf, that it may well be that instead of it being refused, the application is granted, albeit in part with conditions. I would ask that conditions that the licensing panel considered today includes the restriction of operational hours, restriction of the sale of alcohol as a regulated activity, the restriction of provisions for recorded music being played within any restricted opening hours, and that the provision for live music is removed. I would also suggest that with regards to any extension of the license for the period of operation over the New Year's Eve period, that is refused, and that potentially can be dealt with by any sort of temporary events notice at a later date. I have no further representations unless you can.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Are there any final questions from the panel or the legal officer? No. And Mr. Baller, anything else you'd like to sum up with?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say we have many licensed premises that are rurally situated in Sedgemoor. I've got 3 near me and they don't cause any lighting or noise issues. Also, just bearing in mind with the conditions of the license, if you do decide to apply conditions to live and recorded music, you could limit it to so many per year, as opposed to removing them completely. Because if you remove them completely, then Mr. Rove could rely on the Deregulation Act of 2013 and have live and recorded music every single day from 8 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night if he wishes. So rather than remove them, it may be better to just restrict them. That's all I have to say, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, well, thank you everybody for taking part. The panel are now going to retire with the legal officers and committee manager to make our decision. The manager will give you some time, give you an idea of how long we might be, and the panel's just going to make that decision, and we will come back to you as soon as we possibly can. So go make yourselves a cup of coffee or tea and we'll be back when we can. Thank you. The licensing and gambling panel has been asked to consider an application for a new premises licence for the premises known as the Cider Barn, Orchardley Farm, Notting Hill Way, Stone Alliton, Somerset, following objections from Chapel Alliton Parish Council and local residents. The panel is advised that the applicant has reached agreement with the police for conditions to be included on any licence that may be granted, and therefore there is no objection from them. The panel has considered all of the evidence presented by the applicant and objectors, both in person and in writing. The panel's decision is made in accordance with the Council's Statement of Licensing Policy, the Secretary of State's guidance and current case law. The application as submitted is for the sale and supply of alcohol between 11:30 hours and 2300 hours daily and off the premises, the provision of live music 1800 hours to 2300 hours daily, and the provision of recorded music 11:30 hours to 2300 hours daily. The panel has considered the representations both in writing and in person from all parties. In considering the application, the panel is mindful of the fact that the applicant has agreed additional conditions with the police. It is apparent to the panel that there is no overwhelming objection to the application for a premises licence in principle. However, the terms of the licence, especially in relation to outside music, is of major concern to the objectors. Accordingly, it is the decision of the panel to grant a premises licence for the Cider Barn, Orchardley Farm, Notting Hill Way, Stone Alliton, Somerset, on the following terms. Together with the submitted operating schedule, the conditions agreed with the police, and in order to promote the licensing objectives, the following conditions are terms. The sale and supply of alcohol will be permitted from 1100 hours to 2300 hours daily on and off the premises. The provision of amplified music indoors only from 1800 hours to 2300 hours daily. The provision of live music indoors only from 1800 hours to 2300 hours on 2 occasions in any week. All licensable activities are permitted until 1 o'clock in the morning on New Year's Eve. The conditions are: any live music event, party, disco, etc., to which the public are admitted will require an event management plan to be submitted and approved by the police and licensing authority not less than 14 days prior to the event taking place. Capacity limits will be determined following a risk assessment conducted by the fire authority, and any outside lighting will be low level so as not to adversely affect the neighbourhood. A full decision notice with reasons will be published within 5 working days. That is our decision. I thank you all for attending today, and I now close the meeting at 12:25. Thanks very much. Goodbye.